Welcome back everybody to day 2 of the Candidates tournament, the tournament that will decide who the World Championship challenger is going to be. The World Championship is a match between the winner of this tournament and the world champion Magnus Carlsen. The match is going to take place later this year, sometime in November in Dubai. In today's game, we're going to see a game between Anish Giri and Wang. Anish Giri is touted as one of the more exciting players on the roster. Definitely exciting when it comes to social media and everything that comes along with it, the banter behind that, and so on and so forth. And of course, his chess has been improving tremendously in the last year. He's a very solid player. He puts a lot of pressure on his opponents, and we will see what happened in today's game when he faced Wang from China. Let's get right into it. Anish Giri decided to open the game with the move d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight to f3, d5, and now we see the move g3 on the board. Of course, if white plays the move knight to c3, which is another option, then we will get into potentially a queen's gambit decline. If black plays the move bishop to e7, a Ragozin, if black plays the move bishop to b4, a c6. There's a lot of options for both sides. But white, in this case Anish Giri, decided to go for the very versatile Catalan defense with the move g3. Bishop to e7. Black once again has a lot of options. They can play the move bishop to b4. They can take on c4. All of these moves are very, very serious options. The Catalan is an opening that is very, very versatile for both white and black. It offers a lot of options all the way to move 20, 25. So you have to be a very well-rounded player to play the Catalan. You have to understand, you have to feel the positions rather than memorize what you have to do, because options are branching out so wildly all the way up to like move 20, 25, as I mentioned earlier. G3, black decided to play the move bishop to e7, bishop to g2, castle, castle, and we have d takes c4 on the board. Another option in this position is to just simply play the move c6 and kind of defend the central pawn and potentially take on c4 later on and have the move b5 protected by the pawn on c6. Of course, this allows white to play the move b3, defend the pawn on c4, and with the bishop on c1 ready to go to b2, this structure is considered to be quite good for white. So black decided to take on c4. This is one of the main lines. Queen to c2, a6. Another option in this position is to immediately defend the pawn on c4 with the move b5. And after a4, once again black's options branch out, but one of the main lines goes with the move b4. And after the move knight to d2, knight to d5, stopping the attack of this bishop on the rook on a8, knight takes c4, c5, immediately trying to open up the position. But as we will see in a lot of variations, this bishop on g2 is such a powerful piece, dominating this h1, a8 long diagonal. And after d takes c5, bishop to a6, knight to e3, attacking the knight on d5, trying to open up this diagonal, knight to d7, knight takes d5, e takes d5, and the move to c6. This position is considered to be slightly better for white. Nevertheless, there have been high-level games in this position, and black had pretty decent results. At the same time, it is considered that this option offers white a slight advantage. Let's go back to the game. After queen to c2, black played the move a6, a4, bishop to d7. I'm getting ready to put the bishop on c6 and challenge the bishop on g2. Queen takes c4, bishop to c6, bishop to f4. Now the bishop can no longer go to d5 and attack the queen because the pawn on c7 is attacked twice and is going to be lost. So this bishop f4 move is aimed at delaying the attack of the queen on c4 via bishop to d5, which would allow black to kind of get a very comfortable position. Bishop to d6, immediately countering this bishop on f4, knight to c3, bishop to f4. Now this is a stylistic decision by black. Another move, another very important move is the move knight bd7. This is move 11, and remember, as I was mentioning at the beginning of the video, I was saying that the options for both sides branch out all the way to like move 20, 25, and this just showcases the wide range of options that both players have. Knight bd7 is one of the moves, a5 is another one of the moves. Black can play a lot of moves, and for example, after knight to b7, knight to d7, white can play a variety of moves as well. One of them is a5, one of them is e3, rook a d1, rook a c1. Pretty much every single decent move in the position is playable and leads to a very complex battle. So this is why the Catalan is one of the most difficult openings to learn in chess. After knight to d7, my usual recommendation is to go with a5, and after bishop to f4, g takes f4, knight to d5, e3. Once again, we get a very complex battle. Let's go back to the game. In the game, black decided to go bishop takes f4, g takes f4, a5. Now the knight is going to land potentially on the square b4 because white played the move a4, no longer has the move a3 to control the square b4, so black takes advantage of that. At the same time, with this move a5, you're also allowing me to put the knight on b5 potentially. Nevertheless, this b5 square could potentially be defended with the c7 pawn. e3, knight to a6, knight to e5, releasing the tension on this long diagonal between the bishop on g2 and the bishop on c6. Bishop takes g2, king takes g2, c6. Now we see that this square b5 is controlled by the pawn. Black is also getting ready to go queen to b6 and put some pressure on the b file, which makes a lot of sense. h3, and this was the novelty in the game, and this was touted by the world champion Magnus Carlsen during the live broadcast as a very interesting option, and I will explain why in just a second. So h3 is getting ready to put the king to h2, followed by rook to g1, and then I'm going to have this continuous pressure on the g file. Also, the king on h2, we notice that is very well protected, despite the fact that the g file is open, is very well protected on the square h2. Knight g4 is no longer an option at any moment because this pawn on h3 defends that square. Also, this diagonal is completely locked right now, so the king on h2 is going to be perfectly defended. This is a very interesting novelty by white, and I'm sure it will have a lot of followers in the future. Queen to b6, a very natural move. Queen to e2, the queen drops back to defend the pawn on b2. c5, and this was, in my opinion, probably not a decisive mistake. Of course, black had his chances later on, but a very big, earnest decision in this position. Black needed to maintain his pawn structure as it is right now, controlling the square d5, and just shuffle the pieces, be a bit more patient in the position. c5 just opens up the position and allows this knight to get a beautiful square on b5 from which it will never be taken away. So c5, just a very bad positional decision by black. Instead of c5, probably a much better move would have been for black to just go knight to b4, king to h2, rook f d8, rook to g1. As I was mentioning, this is a very typical plan to attack the pawn on g7. Nevertheless, you still have to bring more attackers into the game to create any sort of danger for my king, and that's easier said than done. I will play the move knight bd5, putting the knights beautifully in the center, rook ac1, g6, and I will just sit like this. I will wait for you to show your cards as white. If you want to increase the pressure on the g file with potentially a move such as h4, then unfortunately that move also has its drawbacks, because the pawn on h3 no longer defends the square g4, no longer protects the king nicely. So h4 definitely an available option. At the same time, it's also a bit risky. I'm sure Anish Giri had definitely some ideas in the position as well. So after the move c5, going back to the game, now these central squares, C and D files, open up after the exchange of these two pawns, and that's just going to spell trouble for black, because my pieces control more squares on those files. Rook f d1, a very good move. C takes d4, rook takes d4, rook a d8, rook takes d8, queen takes d8, rook to d1, some massive exchanges in the center, but at the same time, white will want to prevent all the exchanges. So this rook will not be exchanged with this rook on f8, because you want to keep at least a pair of rooks on the board. Queen to a8, king to g1, sidestepping this potential check on this diagonal. So for example, if you play just a move such as, let's say, rook to c1, black is going to have this very nasty check on the long diagonal, and that's just going to simplify the position. We're going to exchange these pawns. I'm going to have some pressure on the b file, and then the position is just going to be very, very close to equality. Now, if you decide to go knight to b5 immediately, the problem is that right now, after knight to b5, I will also have ideas of knight to d5. So you're releasing the control of these two squares, which is quite important. So he decided to play the move king to g1, which I think is a very natural decision. Knight to b4, queen to b5. So instead of the knight going to b5, the queen is going to go to b5, because now we're starting to look at these weaknesses in black's position. The queen on a8 is overcharged, meaning that it's defending two pawns right now. And the queen on a8, it doesn't look too good anyway. It doesn't have any offensive tasks. The queen on b5 is just of a much better quality than the queen on a8. And this is where the big difference is made in the quality of the pieces. White's pieces, much better placed. Black's pieces, the quality is a bit low. Knight to d5, knight takes d5, knight takes d5, rook to c1. Now you blocked the d file. I'm going to go on the other file. h6, queen to d7. The queen infiltrates in black's camp. Knight to f6, queen to d6, g6, b3. And I want to say that this move is, the next actually sequence of moves is very, very important in this type of positions, and it's very important to understand why it is so important. b3, h5, king to h2. These are some seemingly very useless moves. Nevertheless, they're actually extremely useful. So this pawn on b3, not only that it goes away from the second rank, so just imagine a rook landing on the second rank. You're not going to attack this pawn on b2. You're only going to attack the pawn on f2. This potentially prepares for the endgame. Now, at the same time, with the pawn on b3, as we will see later on in the game, I have ideas of hiding the queen on b2 on this long diagonal. And that's going to be an amazing square for the queen to keep control of the long diagonal, keep its offensive tasks, but at the same time be shielded from any sort of rook c8 ideas or knight d5 or anything of that nature that could potentially attack it on this diagonal. So for example, if the queen would be on c3, then rook c8 or knight d5 could potentially come on the board. So this b3, a very versatile move. It shows patience, which is a very, very important characteristic of a good player. And Anish Giri is definitely showing that in this game. King to g7, queen to d4, rook to d8. Now the queen hides to b2, as I was mentioning. Queen to b8, b4, a takes b4, and now Anish Giri errs. He plays the move rook to c4. If you want to try and test yourself at the highest level, stop the video right now and think about what black could do instead of the move b3, which was played in the game. After the move b3, black is in quite deep trouble. Nevertheless, he had an option at this point to find a very nice way of dealing with his problems. You paused the video, you thought about it, now there you have it. Instead of that b3 move that was played in the game, rook to d1 was a very, very strong move, which simply equalizes the position. Black is trying to find his own counterplay, and that's exactly what he will find. You see, the king is no longer on g1, so king h2 was a very useful move. Now rook d1 would have came with check. Unfortunately for white, he's still not in time to create his attack against b7 and all of black's weaknesses. After rook to b4, which is a very natural attempt, queen goes to d8 or to d6, basically anywhere on the d file. I'm planning to go queen to d5 and start attacking checkmates, coordinate my pieces and start attacking checkmates. Rook takes b7, you have to be extremely fast as black because rook takes f7 comes and you're going to be the one getting checkmated first. Queen to d5, rook takes f7, king to h6, and if I continue with the natural move, rook to f6, rook to h1 comes on the board, and after king to g3, once again, stop the video if you want to try to test yourself and find equality for black. You pause the video, you found the move. Now, of course, the move is rook takes h3, king takes h3, queen to h1, king to g3, and now the very important move, h4. You do not want to allow the king to go to f3 because after queen to g1, I will just simply escape. After king to f3, queen to d1, and not king e4, that would allow checkmate on the board, but king to g2, and unfortunately for black, he doesn't have the move queen to g4, which would allow a perpetual check because the knight is defending that square. So this would be winning for white. But instead of queen to g1, black has the simple move h4, forcing the king to go to g4, and now we're going to have our desired perpetual check. Queen to g2, king takes h4, queen to h2, king to g4, queen to g2, and we're just going to sign the score sheets. Now, this was a golden opportunity for Wang Hao, and it all stemmed from this, let's say, fancy decision by Anish to play the move rook to c4 and try to put the rook in front of the queen after taking on b4, which is very logical, but unfortunately fails because of this rook d1, queen d6, rook d5 idea, counterplay idea, which is very important. In this type of positions where you're just being slowly squeezed by your opponent, try to find active counterplay. And the easiest way to find it is to focus on your opponent's king. That is exactly what Wang Hao was supposed to do in this instance. He played the move b3, rook to b4, queen to a7, rook takes b3, and now simply Wang Hao is just having too many problems. He took queen to a4. If he would have tried to defend the pawn on b7 with a move such as rook to b8, the problem is that falls after knight to c6. This is a simple tactic, attacking both the queen and the rook. You cannot take on c6 because I will just simply take on b8. I'm going to be an exchange up, and the position is going to collapse very soon after. So after rook to b3, the position is just simply lost for black. You can no longer defend this pawn on b7. You're also having huge problems on this long diagonal. The knight can never move because I will be able to give a discovery check, knight c6 for example, if you play something like knight to d7. Let's assume this knight on d7, we're exchanging the rules of chess, and it can defend the pawn on b7 like a bishop. Well, the problem is after knight to c6, you can just simply resign. So the knight on f6 will never move away from that square, and if that is the case, you cannot defend the pawn on b7. Queen to a4 was played, rook to b7, queen to e8, and now white just simply has to bring another attacker on the 7th rank on the weakness on f7, which is the only and the most important weakness in black's position, and black just simply doesn't have a good way to defend against it. Rook to d5 was played, queen to b7, knight to e4, knight takes f7, and Wang Hao just simply resigned at this point because checkmate is going to come after any move with the knight. It's going to be a discovery check. First of all, I'm threatening to go knight to d6. That's just going to win the queen. But even worse than that, after you move the king anywhere after a discovery check, you're going to get checkmated on the 7th rank. So the position is just simply over. A beautiful dominant game by Anish Giri showcased his skills, showcased his very good preparation with that idea with king h3, with h3 in the opening, followed by king h2 and rook to g1. He showed a better understanding, and he is now only half a point behind the leader, Jan Nepomniachtchi. He is definitely Anish Giri, that is a player to watch in the upcoming games. It's going to be super exciting to see what's going to happen in the remainder of the games. We have 4 challengers battling for that coveted title. We have, of course, Jan Nepomniachtchi, who is leading the tournament, but 3 players are chasing him very, very closely behind. That is Fabiano Caruana, MVL, and now Anish Giri, who played just a brilliant game. Let's see what happens in the next rounds. If you guys like the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave the feedback in the comment. See you guys tomorrow.